Hello and welcome to Sky Blue Stories. Today it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by a guest all the way from Florida in the United States of America, former City Academy product and the current Director of Operations at the University of Central Florida's men's soccer program, Mr. Alex Gott. Alex, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm well, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. A bit shaky after the result last night, but
Yeah,
we'll brush that off aside for the interview.
yeah.
So let's get straight into it. And I'm sure you won't mind people knowing that, I know your dad quite well, and he's a massive Cov fan like me. I don't really think you would have had much choice as to what football team you supported growing up.
No, I think you'd be right in that. I remember growing up and that kind of being the only route, and it's all I've ever known. Obviously, back when Highfield Road was there, I remember from a young age being in the Stoke Working Men's Club. I'd go to the Stoke Working Men's Club opposite the field where my dad used to play, and then we walk all the way from Stoke Working Men's Club over the fans up to Highfield Road. And I think the story is that my dad was born in a sink right near Highfield Road. So I don't really, when you're right, I don't think there's a whole lot of choice, but
No,
I've got some really cool memories of my dad there.
Yeah, really, and I think very much like me with my dad. Obviously, that was probably your childhood going up the football. Do you remember your first game, and who was your first favourite player?
I don't remember my first game, but I remember. It's funny. I wish I did remember the first game. I think my first big moment was when I was a mascot. I was a mascot for Coventry away at Crewe Alexander, and we won 6-1. And I remember Gary Breen was the captain back then, and that was pretty cool. And there's a photo. My dad's we have a room in our house, and my dad's done a really cool job of making it into like a memorabilia room. And there's a photo in there. So I think if I really go back to it, I'd say might be a random one, but Gary Breen.
Gary Breen. They still sing his chant on the terraces, mate. There's nothing wrong with that.
We all dream of a team of Gary Breens.
Right. So let's get into playing and your journey. Was you always a goalkeeper? Because when you hear goalkeepers speak, a common recurrence is they were outfield players. They kind of got stuck in between the sticks against their own will, really, but they turned out to be quite good at it, and they just stayed there. Or was you going down that route, or was you always wanted to be a goalkeeper?
At first I actually wasn't a goalkeeper. I remember as a young lad, I was a bit more of a broader guy. And I think I worked my way from striker. I used to play for Bedworth Eagles, and I worked my way all the way up from a striker, all the way back, and somehow I ended up in goal. And I had this kind of fearlessness to me, where I wasn't bothered. I really enjoyed the ball hitting me in this really odd sense, and making saves. And I was quite lazy, so I wasn't always a goalkeeper. But what had happened was I actually I ended up back there, and I tended to be quite good at it. And I've always been quite a loud person, and as a goalkeeper, I obviously have to talk a lot. So it just fell. It fell absolutely perfect, and then it just took off from there. Really, it felt perfect being a goalkeeper.
Am I right in saying you were on trial at the Villa before you went to Cov?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. I was in the same age group, and I don't like doing this, but to name drop, it was with Jack Grealish's age group.
Right.
So I played with Jack for I was on trial at Aston Villa for a long time. You're talking almost 3 months I was on trial at Aston Villa. It was a long time. And I remember my mum and dad, that the amount of hours they put in to take me at the time. Aston Villa's academy had an indoor setup. So they obviously had Bodymore Heath, and then they had an indoor setup actually by the stadium in Aston.
Yeah.
So my mum would drive me. She'd come home from working, and she'd drive me all the way up into Birmingham, into city centre Birmingham, and then they'd feed us beans and toast after, and then come back, go bed. And then after about 3 months, it was really weird. A few people at the club would say, "Hey, have you signed the contract yet?" And I said, No. I mean, I'm young at this point. I'm 12 years old. And all of a sudden, my dad got a phone call that it wasn't going to happen. But in that same week, my dad had got a phone call from an ex-policeman, a friend of his. Obviously, my dad was in the police force, and they were looking for a goalkeeper in that age group. And then as soon as I overheard that, I actually overheard that conversation driving to training at Villa. And then in that moment, I said, no. I said, I want to go and trial at Coventry. And then that turned out to be, maybe a 3 month trial. And then when that was it, contract was offered there. And obviously you sign a contract at 12 years old. At the time, it was a 2-year contract. So you sign a 12 to 14 and a 14 to a 16. I remember signing the contract Coventry on my birthday. I remember doing it on my birthday. It was really cool moment.
Must have been, proud City fan, from a family of proud City fans. You must have been on cloud 9 when you got offered that contract.
Yeah, I was, and I think it just meant so much. And I think not only that, I think when you sign a contract for an academy, you're obviously at a higher level. So, hard work had paid off in that sense. But then just to do it for a club that means so much to me was probably the biggest part. It was really, really, really cool. And then obviously you get to represent that club for the however long, hopefully. And I know we'll get into it, but it opened up a lot of doors at Coventry with a lot of people that I didn't even expect I'd sit next to.
So, talking about life in the academy, you were there from, as you mentioned, 12 for quite a few years. What was it like, and what influence? I think just before you left, I think he left to go to Wigan, but what sort of influence was Gregor Rioch? Because I've heard so many good things about it.
It's funny you asked that. The first person I'd always say is Gregor Rioch. So when I came in, filling enough at 12, it was the first year. Gregor Rioch also came in. So when Gregor came in, I came in. So automatically we had quite a cool little bond. Gregor is a phenomenal human being. I've never met many people that I shouldn't say it in that sense, but Gregor always put others before himself. And it was Gregor at the time, and then Richard Stevens, and then a guy called Andy Crabtree. That was kind of the top 3 in that sense. But it was really cool because Gregor just brought in a totally different sense of professionalism. He made it a really enjoyable environment to come in. He was obviously the head of the academy, but you'd see him at training sessions with younger teams. He built a real family base. And at the time, the first team manager, if I'm right in saying, was Adi Boothroyd. So Gregor and Adi, and we're very totally different people. Like Adi Boothroyd's a very, very, very serious guy. So you had the first team, which was very serious, and then you had Gregor, which was very serious, but also made it into a fun environment with, 12-year-olds. I know you're an academy, but you're still only 12, 13 years old. And you're at training 3 or 4 times a week with a game on the weekend. You're not at a stage where you're being paid for it and your parents putting a lot of the miles in and paying for petrol and all those things. But Gregor was such an incredible influence. And, I still reach out to him here and there. I'll send him the odd text, and there's some things that sometimes pop up. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure a lot of other guys would say the same about Gregor. Definitely.
Yeah, I've heard so many good things about him, interviews I've read and people I've listened to. Just off the back of that, you mentioned about, your mum would drive you over to Villa and stuff like that. Do you think that's kind of, people don't realise the sacrifices that parents have to make when their kids are playing, young football at such a young age?
Well, yeah, to give you perspective, my mum's an infection control nurse, and my dad at the time is a detective. She was in the murder scene. So, all I've ever known is that my parents are in, either the police force or the NHS. But the amount of hours that they did put in was just, I think now I'm in a position in my life where, I managed to earn some money and set myself up and all those things. And now I understand what they did for me, because now I'm paying my own bills. I'm paying all these different things. I'm like, man, I just can't believe how much my parents really did for me. And I've been really fortunate with an incredible upbringing. But it's a funny story. I actually recently spoke to Shay Adams. Shay was in the academy at the same time as me, and when I got home, my dad had said to me, and I text Shay, and it was a message from my parents towards Shay, because me and Shay used to drive a lot to games, because if Shay couldn't get there with his parents, my mum would actually pick Shay up. And just little things like stopping off and getting a hamburger from McDonald's just to feel something in the body, just to go training. And like you look at these guys now, and Shay would be the first person to say it was just what others did for him and what others did for us was just extraordinary. And I mean, I don't know how I'll ever repay my parents in that sense, because I can't imagine the time and the stress that they did put in. But they know I'm very thankful. They know that, and you know, when they come out to Orlando, I try and take care of them.